component of the computer which is called Central Processing Unit. So, what does it mean by Central Processing Unit? Actually, Central Processing Unit is one of the chips that control every process that occurs inside the computers. The Central Processing Unit, also known as the brain of a computer. On the other hand, the CPU will execute instructions and transfer information from other resources. So, this is one of the samples of the CPU. To find more information about the Central Processing Unit, let's move to another session. Cornerstone of millions of computers across the globe, but it was not always the case that computers had a CPU. The modern CPU is the result of decades of research and innovation, and even today, its history is not complete.
The first history of CPU that I want to share with you is a vacuum tube. Vacuum tubes invented on 1940 until 1956. Vacuum tubes have very big size and it uses the entire room and is very expensive. Besides that, it only understood the lowest level machine of programming language. The example of first generation computer is like ENIAC and EDWAC. As you can see, this is a picture of vacuum tube. Secondly is transistor. Transistor is invented on 1956 until 1963. Transistor become more cheaper, smaller, faster than vacuum tubes. Besides that, transistor also become more efficient and more reliable. Next, transistor also using the symbolic assembly language that easy to give some specific instruction. Of transistor and also example of IBM System 360. Integrated circuit, the user can interact with the computer using keyboard and monitor and also interface with the operating system. Besides that, integrated circuit also can run more than one program at once time. Next, integrated circuit also smaller and cheaper than vacuum tubes and transistor. This one is an example of the integrated circuit. The another history of CPU is a microprocessor. Microprocessor invented on 1971 and until now. Microprocessor got thousands of integrated circuits are built on the single chip. Besides that, microprocessor made the computer become more powerful. This is an example of microprocessor. In addition, I want to share with you is artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence still in development, but still have some application that being used today, such as voice recognition. Artificial intelligence also has the goal is to develop a device that can respond to input the natural language and that capable of learning. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm going to explain you about the types of processing unit. Back in the days, the first processing unit was made by a transistor, followed by integrated circuit. The integrated circuit consists of 5 integrations. The first integration was small scale integration, followed by small medium scale integration, large scale integration, very large scale integration, and ultra large scale integration. But nowadays we use microprocessor as new types of processor. We'll go to another slide. A transistor CPU was transistorized during 1950 to the 1960. It was consists element of vacuum tubes and relays. It was bulky, unreliable, and fragile switching. That's why we moved to integrated circuit. Integrated circuit consists of SSI, small-scale integration, during 1964, which is using a transistor number 1 to 10. And for the logic gates, we use 1 to 12. For MSI, the medium one, is followed by 1968, using transistor number 10 to 500. And for the logic gates, we use 13 to 99. For LSI, is made from 1971, 500 to 20,000, and the logic gates using 100 to 9999. For VLSI, very large scale integration, which is made from 1980, is 20,000 to 1 million. And for the logic gate, is using 10,000 to 99 and 999. For ULSI is using transistor 1 million and more, and 100,000 more for logic gates number. Here's a SSI, MSI, and VLSI, LSI image for your information. The next slide is the further explanation for small-scale integration. Small-scale integration using logic gates, simple circuits, combination, and circuit. The medium integration using functional circuit, chronologic, logic shift, comparison, and arithmetic. But for large-scale integration, we have much more, which is using instruction set, arithmetic, and logic subsystem, control unit subsystem, and register. The microprocessor, which is nowadays we using, for the famous one, we use Intel and AMD.
Next, there is 4 main functions of CPU. First is fetch. Each instruction is stored in memory has its own address. The processor takes this address number from the program counter, which is responsible for tracking which is instruction the CPU should execute it next. 2. Decode. Assembly code must be decoded into binary instructions which are understandable to CPU. So, this step called decoding. 3. Execute. While executing instruction, the CPU can do the more 1 or 3 things: do calculation with its arithmetic logic unit, or is called ALU, more data from one memory location to another. 4. Stop. The CPU must give feedback after executing instruction and the output data is written to the memory.